She was a blind woman, her dignity her only shield, her late husband's cane her only guide. A racist cop shattered more than just wood that morning. He shattered a community's illusion of safety. What he didn't know? Her son wasn't just any lawyer. He was the state's most formidable federal prosecutor, and he was coming home. Friends, viewers, and seekers of truth, welcome. The story you are about to witness unfolds, in the quiet corners of a town much like any other, yet it carries a weight that resonates far beyond its borders. This isn't merely an account of injustice. It is a testament to the unyielding strength found in the most vulnerable, and the powerful reckoning that can follow when lines of decency are crossed. If you're joining us for the first time, we'd be truly honored if you'd share where you're watching from in the comments below. It helps us feel connected to this incredible global community. And if narratives that challenge, inspire, and demand reflection are what you seek, please consider subscribing to our channel and clicking that notification bell. We are committed to amplifying voices that often go unheard and sharing stories that deserve to be brought into the light. Your presence here means the world to us. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Now let's delve into the heart of today's story. The town of Harmony Creek, Georgia, was aptly named, or so its residents like to believe. Nestled in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, it was a place where Southern charm was ladled out as generously as sweet tea on a summer afternoon. Ancient oaks draped in Spanish moss lined streets of meticulously kept antebellum homes, their wraparound porches often occupied by families waving to passers-by. The town square, with its requisite Confederate soldier statue, a point of quiet, simmering contention for some and unexamined pride for others, was the hub of local life. Here farmers sold their produce on Saturdays. Children chased pigeons and old-timers exchanged stories that had been polished smooth by countless retellings. Harmony Creek prided itself on its tight-knit community, its adherence to tradition, and its perceived immunity to the harsher realities of the world beyond its tranquil borders. But like any melody, harmony can be disrupted by a discordant note, and beneath the veneer of genteel pleasantries, currents of older, less harmonious sentiments still flowed. One of the town's most steadfast yet understated figures was Mrs. Eleanora Vance. At 72 years of age, Eleanora had seen Harmony Creek through many seasons of change, though some changes, she knew, were merely surface deep. Blind since a fever stole her sight in her late 40s, she navigated the world with a quiet grace and an unwavering dignity that commanded a subtle form of respect, even from those who might otherwise overlook her. Her small, immaculately kept cottage on Elm Street, with its vibrant marigold garden she tended by touch and memory, was a testament to her resilience. Eleanora's days were structured by simple, cherished routines. Chief among them was her morning walk. Rain or shine, shortly after dawn, when the air was still cool and carried the scent of dew-kissed earth, she would emerge from her home. In her hand, she always carried a distinctive cane, not a flimsy modern contraption, but a sturdy, polished oak staff, its handle worn smooth by time and use. It had belonged to her late husband, Thomas, a man of quiet strength himself, a high school history teacher who had instilled in Eleanora a love for the narratives of the past and the courage to face the future. The cane was more than a tool for navigation. It was a link to Thomas, a symbol of their shared journey, and an extension of her own steadfast spirit. Each tap on the uneven sidewalks of Harmony Creek was a small assertion of her independence, a rhythm of self-reliance. In the community, Eleanora was Mrs. Vance, a figure of quiet respectability. She was a faithful member of the Harmony Creek Baptist Church, her voice a soft but true alto in the choir. She baked lemon pound cakes for town potlucks that were legendary, and though she couldn't see the smiles they brought, she felt the warmth in the voices that thanked her. Yet there was a certain reserve about her, a gentle boundary that few crossed. She was a private woman, not given to gossip or idle chatter. Her wisdom dispensed sparingly but with unerring insight when sought. Unknown to most in Harmony Creek, certainly unknown to those who might only see an elderly blind black woman, was the full measure of her son, Marcus Vance. Marcus was Eleanora's only child, her pride and her quiet joy. He lived and worked several states away in the bustling capital, his life a world removed from the slow cadences of Harmony Creek. Marcus was a name that carried considerable weight in legal circles. Assistant U.S. Attorney Marcus Vance, a man renowned for his sharp intellect, his unimpeachable integrity, and his relentless pursuit of justice, particularly in complex cases involving civil rights violations and official corruption. His rise had been meteoric, fueled by a fierce dedication inherited from his parents and a profound understanding of the law's power to both protect and oppress. Eleanora rarely spoke of Marcus's specific achievements or his formidable position. To her friends in Harmony Creek, he was simply my Marcus, her good son who called every Sunday without fail and visited when his demanding schedule allowed. These visits were cherished events, filled with long talks on her porch, his deep voice a comforting counterpoint to the chirping crickets. She understood the importance of his work, the dangers it sometimes entailed, and she held a quiet fear for him, a mother's constant prayer. But more than fear, she held an unshakable faith in his character. She knew the steel in his spine was forged from the same values Thomas had taught, the same dignity she herself embodied. This hidden strength, this powerful connection, was a quiet undercurrent in Eleanora's life, unseen but profoundly present. Into this seemingly placid tableau of Harmony Creek, a new figure had recently arrived, Officer Ryan Calder. In his late 20s, Calder was a recent transfer from a larger, more turbulent city department, where whispers of his overly aggressive tactics and quick temper had preceded him. He was tall, built like a linebacker, with a swagger that seemed ill-suited to the town's unhurried pace. His closely cropped blonde hair and ice-blue eyes, often hidden behind reflective sunglasses, gave him an air of detached menace. Calder made no secret of his belief that Harmony Creek was soft and in need of real policing. He was eager to make his mark, to assert his authority, and he seemed to possess a particular disdain for anyone who didn't fit his narrow definition of respectability. Among the black residents of Harmony Creek, a wary caution had quickly spread regarding Officer Calder. They recognized the type. He was a storm brewing on a clear day, and they called him, amongst themselves and in hushed tones, Bull Calder, for his tendency to charge first and think later, if at all. The crisp autumn morning began like any other for Eleanora Vance. The air held the promise of a cool day, the scent of wood smoke already a faint perfume from a neighbor's early fire. She'd had her tea, listened to the morning news on the radio, and now, with Thomas's oak cane in hand, she stepped out onto Elm Street. The familiar tap-tap-tap of her cane on the sidewalk was a comforting sound, a metronome for her steady, unhurried pace. She knew this route by heart, every crack in the pavement, every overgrown root that threatened to trip the unwary. Her senses, sharpened by the loss of sight, painted a vivid picture of the world around her, the rustle of leaves, the distant bark of a dog, the warmth of the rising sun on her face. As she turned onto Main Street, heading towards the small bakery where she sometimes bought a scone, she was unaware of the patrol car idling half a block away. Officer Ryan Calder was on duty, already restless, sipping lukewarm coffee and scanning the street with a bored, proprietary gaze. He saw Eleanora approaching, a slow-moving figure, her dark skin a stark contrast. to the predominantly white faces that usually populated Main Street at this hour. A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, or a predatory instinct crossed his face. He'd seen her around, this old blind woman. To him, she was an anomaly, an easy target for his brand of assertive policing. He decided on a whim, fueled by nothing more than prejudice and a desire to flex his authority, that she needed to be checked out. He pulled his cruiser to the curb a few feet ahead of her, the engine's sudden silence an abrupt intrusion into the morning's calm. Eleanora paused, her head tilting slightly, her cane momentarily still. She sensed the change in the atmosphere, the subtle shift that often heralded an unwelcome encounter. Calder emerged from the car, his movements deliberately slow, his hand resting near the butt of his holstered weapon. "Morning, ma'am," he said, his voice a shade too loud, an edge of condescension already present. Eleanora turned her face towards the sound. "Good morning, officer," she replied, her voice calm, betraying no alarm. "Out for a stroll, are we?" Calder continued, stepping closer, blocking her path. "I am taking my usual morning walk, yes," Eleanora stated, her tone even. "This early, all by yourself?" he pressed, his questions implying something untoward. "You know, it can be dangerous out here for someone like you." Eleanora's chin lifted a fraction. "Someone like me, officer? I have walked this route for over 20 years. I know this town, and it knows me." A smirk played on Calder's lips. "Times are changing, ma'am. We gotta be vigilant. Can I see some identification?" "I am not carrying identification, officer. I am simply walking in my own neighborhood. Am I suspected of committing a crime?" Eleanora's voice, though quiet, held a core of unyielding steel. She knew her rights, even if he chose to ignore them. This calm defiance, this refusal to be cowed, seemed to stoke a peculiar anger in Calder. He wasn't used to being questioned, especially not by an old, blind black woman. His face hardened. "You're being uncooperative. What's that you're carrying?" He gestured towards her cane with a contemptuous flick of his head. "Some kind of weapon." The absurdity of the question, the deliberate malice behind it, struck Eleanora. "This," she said, her grip tightening on the smooth oak, "is my cane. It belonged to my husband. It helps me to walk." "Let me see it," Calder demanded, reaching out. Eleanora instinctively pulled it back slightly. "There is no reason for you to—" Before she could finish, Calder's hand shot out and snatched the cane from her grasp. The suddenness of it, the raw aggression, left Eleanora momentarily speechless. He examined it with a sneer, turning it over in his hands as if it were contraband. "Seems pretty sturdy," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Could do some damage with this, couldn't you?" And then, with a sudden, violent twist, he brought the oak cane down sharply against the edge of the curb. The sound of splintering wood, a sharp, sickening crack, echoed in the quiet morning air. Thomas's cane, her cane, snapped in two, the polished wood jagged and broken. Calder tossed the two pieces onto the sidewalk at Eleanora's feet. "There," he said, a cruel satisfaction in his eyes. "Now it's not so dangerous. You be more careful, ma'am. And maybe stay off the streets if you can't see where you're going." He turned, got back into his cruiser, and drove away, leaving Eleanora standing alone, the shattered remains of her dignity and her husband's memory at her feet. For a long moment, Eleanora Vance did not move. The world, once a familiar landscape of sounds and scents, had become a treacherous alien place. The sharp, acrid smell of Officer Calder's disdain seemed to linger in the air, thicker than the morning mist. Her breath hitched in her chest, a silent sob caught before it could escape. The broken halves of the cane lay on the sidewalk like a fallen soldier, a symbol of the casual brutality she had just endured. She could hear the town around her beginning to stir. The distant chime of the bakery door, the rumble of a delivery truck, the hushed voices of early risers. A curtain twitched in the window of the hardware store across the street. Mrs. Henderson, watering her petunias on her porch down the block, suddenly found her gaze intensely focused on a particular bloom. No one approached. No one spoke. The silence of Harmony Creek in that moment was not peaceful. It was the silence of complicity, of fear, of averted eyes. Slowly, painstakingly, Eleanora knelt. Her fingers, trembling slightly, brushed against the splintered wood. One piece was still warm from her grip. The other lay half in the gutter, its smooth, polished surface now marred and violated. With a tenderness that belied the violence of the act, she gathered the two pieces. Holding them to her chest, she rose, her shoulders squared despite the tremor that ran through her. The humiliation was a burning coal in her stomach, but deeper still was a cold, profound sorrow for the loss of Thomas's gift, for the desecration of a memory. Her journey home was an ordeal. Without the familiar guidance of her cane, every step was uncertain. She used the walls of buildings, the edges of lawns, her outstretched hands brushing against brick and hedge to navigate the blocks back to Elm Street. The world felt larger, more menacing. The usual 10-minute walk stretched into an eternity of careful, hesitant steps, each one a testament to her vulnerability and her unyielding will. Once inside her cottage, the carefully constructed composure she had maintained in public began to crumble. She laid the broken pieces of the cane on her small kitchen table side by side, like a cherished artifact that had been defiled. Sinking into a chair, she finally allowed the tears to come, silent, hot tears of grief and outrage. It wasn't just the physical act of breaking the cane. It was the officer's sneering contempt, the casual cruelty, the utter disregard for her humanity. It was the memory of Thomas's hand, warm and strong, presenting her with the cane years ago, saying, "This will help you walk tall, Eleanora, always walk tall." She sat there for a long time, the morning sun slanting through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny, indifferent speck in her vast sea of pain. She knew she couldn't let this pass. This wasn't just about a broken cane. It was about the arrogance of power, the poison of prejudice that still festered in the heart of Harmony Creek. Later that morning, her hands steady once more, Eleanora picked up the telephone. Her fingers fumbled slightly as she dialed the long-distance number, a number she knew by heart. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered, crisp and professional, yet with an underlying warmth that always soothed her. Marcus Vance speaking. "Marcus, dear," Eleanora began, her voice lower than usual, "it's your mother." "Mom, is everything all right?" His tone sharpened instantly with concern. He knew her well enough to detect the faint tremor, the carefully suppressed distress. Eleanora took a breath. She had been reluctant to burden him. His life was so demanding, his responsibilities so great. But this was different. "Something has happened, Marcus," she said. And then, calmly, factually, without embellishment or overt emotion, she recounted the morning's events. Officer Calder's unprovoked stop, his taunts and the deliberate, brutal snapping of Thomas's cane. She didn't speak of her tears, or the fear that had briefly clutched her, only the facts. On the other end of the line, hundreds of miles away in his sterile high-rise office, Marcus Vance listened, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the receiver. A cold, controlled fury rose within him, a familiar sensation when confronted with injustice, but this time it was deeply, searingly personal. His mother, his strong, independent, dignified mother, subjected to such a vile, petty act of cruelty. He pictured her, blind and alone, facing down that uniformed thug. The image was intolerable. "Are you hurt, Mom?" he asked, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "Only my pride, Marcus, and Thomas's cane," she said softly. The cane it's broken." "I'm coming home, Mom," Marcus said, his decision instantaneous and absolute. "I'll be on the first available flight. Don't you worry about anything. I'll handle this." "Marcus, I don't want to cause you any trouble." "Mom," he interrupted gently but firmly, "this is my trouble. This is what I do. You just rest. I'll be there by evening." After he hung up, Marcus stared out his office window at the sprawling cityscape. But he didn't see it. He saw the quiet streets of Harmony Creek, his mother's marigold garden, and the smug, cruel face of a police officer who had just made the biggest mistake of his career. He made 2 calls, one to his secretary to clear his schedule and book a flight, the other to a trusted colleague in the Department of Justice, a brief, coded conversation that set certain wheels in motion. Back in Harmony Creek, whispers of the incident had begun to circulate, primarily within the black community. Mrs. Henderson, who had indeed seen more than she let on, recounted the story with outrage to her prayer group. The young man sweeping the sidewalk in front of the bakery had also witnessed it, his initial fear giving way to a simmering anger. They spoke in hushed tones, a familiar mix of indignation and helplessness. Officer Bull Calder was known. Challenging him was risky. Meanwhile, Officer Calder, feeling a sense of smug satisfaction, recounted a sanitized, self-serving version of the encounter to a couple of his colleagues back at the station. "Had to put an old biddy in her place," he boasted, omitting the crucial detail of her blindness or the deliberate destruction of her cane. "Getting mouthy, you know how they are." His colleagues, either indifferent or sharing his casual bigotry, chuckled. Chief Dale Miller, a man whose tenure was marked more by a desire to avoid controversy than to uphold justice, heard a third-hand, watered-down version and mentally filed it away as Calder being Calder. He made a mental note to have a quiet word with him about community relations, but there was no urgency. It was, after all, just an old black woman. What trouble could it possibly cause? Marcus Vance arrived in Harmony Creek as dusk was settling, the sky painted in hues of purple and fading orange. The town, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights, looked deceptively peaceful. He drove directly to his mother's cottage on Elm Street. The sight of her, composed but with an undeniable sadness in the lines around her eyes, solidified his resolve. He held her close, a long, comforting embrace. Then he sat at the kitchen table and looked at the 2 pieces of the broken oak cane. He picked them up, his strong fingers tracing the jagged splinters. This was more than damaged wood. It was evidence of a profound disrespect, a violation that cried out for redress. Eleanora recounted the story again, this time with more detail, her voice occasionally trembling as she described Calder's sneering face, the shock of the cane snapping. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression grim, his lawyer's mind cataloging every fact, every nuance. "He didn't know who I was, Marcus," Eleanora said softly when she finished. "He just saw what he wanted to see." "He will learn, Mom," Marcus said, his voice quiet but imbued with an iron will. "He will learn who you are, and he will learn who I am." The next morning, Marcus, dressed in a sharply tailored dark suit that spoke of authority and understated power, began his work. His first stop was not the police station, but the bakery and the hardware store on Main Street. He spoke with the young man who had been sweeping, and with Mr. Abernathy, the elderly owner of the hardware store, who had also witnessed the incident from his window. Marcus's demeanor was calm, respectful, but his questions were precise, his gaze unwavering. He wasn't an imposing physical presence, but there was an intensity about him, an aura of focused determination that made people surprisingly forthcoming. He obtained 2 sworn affidavits, their accounts corroborating his mother's story in every crucial detail. Only then did Marcus proceed to the Harmony Creek Police Department. The station was a small, unassuming brick building, its atmosphere thick with the smell of stale coffee and indifference. The desk sergeant, a portly man named Henderson, looked up with disinterest as Marcus approached. "I'm here to file a formal complaint against Officer Ryan Calder," Marcus stated, his voice even. Sergeant Henderson grunted. "Complaint about what?" "Assault, destruction of private property, and intimidation under color of authority," Marcus replied, his legal terminology sharp and precise. Henderson raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his dull eyes. "Them's mighty big words. You a lawyer or something?" "Something like that," Marcus said. "I'd like to speak with Chief Miller." Chief Dale Miller was a man in his late 50s, his face weathered, his uniform slightly rumpled. He exuded an air of weary complacency. He listened to Marcus's polite but firm recitation of the complaint against Officer Calder with an expression that mingled annoyance and boredom. "Mr. Vance," Chief Miller said when Marcus had finished, his tone patronizing, "I understand you're upset on your mother's behalf. Officer Calder is a young officer, still learning the ropes of community policing in a town like ours. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. He reported a minor interaction with an uncooperative individual. Perhaps your mother was confused?" Marcus's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Chief Miller, my mother is 72 years old and blind. She was not confused. She was assaulted and her property was willfully destroyed by one of your officers. Are you saying you find Officer Calder's version that a blind elderly woman was uncooperative and somehow provoked him into breaking her cane more credible?" Chief Miller shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "No, I didn't say that. But you know how these things can get blown out of proportion. We'll look into it, of course. Standard procedure?" He made a vague gesture of dismissal. "Officer Calder is a good boy, just a little enthusiastic." Marcus leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a quiet, almost dangerous level. "Chief Miller, I appreciate your commitment to standard procedure. However, this incident involves a clear violation of my mother's civil rights. As such, it falls under federal jurisdiction." He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a slim leather wallet. He opened it and placed it on Miller's desk. The gold shield and credentials of the United States Department of Justice gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Marcus Vance," he said, his voice no longer just polite, but resonant with an authority that filled the small office. "Assistant United States Attorney, District of Georgia, and Eleanora Vance is my mother. This misunderstanding, as you call it, is now a federal matter. I will expect your full cooperation and that of Officer Calder in the ensuing investigation, or you will find that enthusiasm can have very serious consequences when it tramples on the United States Constitution." Chief Miller stared at the credentials, his face paling. The folksy, dismissive demeanor vanished, replaced by a sudden, acute awareness of the precipice on which he and his department now stood. The name Marcus Vance suddenly clicked in his memory. He'd read about some of his high-profile corruption cases. This wasn't just an angry son. This was a federal prosecutor with a reputation for dismantling careers and institutions that stood in the way of justice. The minor interaction had just exploded into a major crisis. Officer Bull Calder had indeed charged, but he had charged headfirst into a steel wall. The arrival of federal investigators in Harmony Creek sent a shockwave through the small town. Two stern-faced agents from the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, dispatched by Marcus's office, set up a temporary command post in a rented office space just off the town square. Their presence was discreet but unmistakable, a clear signal that this was no longer a local affair to be swept under the rug. Marcus, while officially recusing himself from leading the direct investigation due to the personal connection, remained in Harmony Creek, a watchful, guiding presence. He ensured his mother was comfortable and supported, but his primary focus was on ensuring the integrity of the investigation. He met with the lead federal agent, Sarah Jennings, a seasoned investigator known for her tenacity, providing her with the initial affidavits and a detailed understanding of Harmony Creek's social dynamics. The federal probe moved with a speed and thoroughness that stunned the local police department. Agent Jennings and her team began by re-interviewing Mr. Abernathy and the young bakery worker, whose testimonies were now given with a newfound confidence, free from the fear of local reprisal. They canvassed Elm Street and Main Street, seeking other potential witnesses. Mrs. Henderson, initially hesitant to speak to local police, readily recounted what she saw to the federal agents, her voice trembling with indignation. Officer Ryan Calder was formally served with a notice of investigation and placed on administrative leave. His swagger had evaporated, replaced by a sullen, defensive anger. When questioned by Agent Jennings, his version of events, that Eleanora Vance had been belligerent and her cane had broken accidentally during a struggle, crumbled under the weight of contradictory witness statements and Jennings' sharp, relentless questioning. His claims of her aggression seemed ludicrous when juxtaposed with the image of a 72-year-old blind woman. Chief Miller, now fully grasping the gravity of the situation, offered his complete, if somewhat belated, cooperation. The investigation, however, soon expanded beyond Calder's individual actions. Agent Jennings, prompted by certain nuances in the witness testimonies and Marcus's quiet guidance, began to look into past complaints against the Harmony Creek PD, particularly those involving Officer Calder since his transfer, and even older, unresolved issues within the department. A pattern began to emerge, a disproportionate number of stops and aggressive interactions involving black residents, complaints that were often dismissed or inadequately investigated, and a general culture of permissiveness when it came to certain officers' conduct. The Bull Calder incident was not an anomaly. It was a symptom of a deeper malaise. The story inevitably leaked to the press. A small article in the Harmony Creek Chronicle, initially downplaying the incident, was quickly overshadowed by more aggressive reporting from regional newspapers and then state-level news outlets. The headline, "Federal Prosecutors Blind Mother Assaulted, Cane Broken by Local Cop," was sensational and damning. Harmony Creek, which had long prided itself on its peaceful image, was suddenly under a harsh, unwelcome spotlight. Public opinion in the town became sharply divided. The black community, long accustomed to a certain level of casual discrimination, felt a surge of both outrage at the injustice against Mrs. Vance and a flicker of hope that real change might finally be possible. Many white residents were shocked and appalled, expressing support for Eleanora and condemnation for Calder. However, a vocal minority defended Calder, echoing sentiments about respect for authority and suggesting that Marcus Vance was using his federal power to unfairly target a local officer and stir up trouble. Anonymous online comment sections became battlegrounds of accusation and defense. The culmination of the initial phase of the investigation was a specially convened town hall meeting held in the Harmony Creek High School auditorium. The room was packed, the atmosphere electric with tension. Chief Miller, looking pale and harried, made a brief, uncomfortable statement about the ongoing investigation and the department's commitment to justice. Agent Jennings then presented a preliminary summary of the federal findings, outlining the corroborated facts of the assault on Eleanora Vance and hinting at the broader systemic issues uncovered. Then Marcus Vance was invited to speak. He didn't speak as a federal prosecutor but as a son. He spoke of his mother's quiet dignity, her resilience, her love for Harmony Creek. He held up the two broken pieces of the oak cane, its splintered ends a stark visual testament to the violence inflicted. "This cane," he said, his voice resonating through the silent auditorium, "was more than just a piece of wood. It was a symbol of my father's love, a tool of my mother's independence, and a testament to her strength." Officer Calder did not just break a cane, he attacked what it represented. He sought to diminish a woman he did not understand, to intimidate a citizen he was sworn to protect. He continued, his gaze sweeping across the faces in the crowd. "This is not just about one officer or one broken cane. It is about the sacred trust between a community and those who wear a badge. It is about ensuring that justice is not blind to color or age or vulnerability. Harmony Creek has a choice: to confront this ugliness, to root it out, and to build a community truly worthy of its name, or to allow the discord of prejudice and abuse of power to shatter its peace." Finally, Eleanora Vance herself was asked if she wished to speak. Supported by Marcus, she walked slowly to the podium. Her voice, though soft, carried to every corner of the room. "I have lived in Harmony Creek my whole life," she began. "I have always believed in the good people of this town. What happened to me was wrong, it was cruel, but I do not seek revenge. I seek justice. I seek a Harmony Creek where no one, no matter who they are, has to fear those who are meant to protect them. My husband taught me to walk tall, and even without his cane I will continue to do so." Her simple, powerful words, delivered with unshakable dignity, left a profound impact. The applause that followed was not thunderous, but it was sustained, heartfelt, and it seemed to mark a turning point for the divided town. Officer Calder, who had been ordered to attend, sat stone-faced, his career and reputation in ruins. The aftermath of the federal investigation and the town hall meeting brought sweeping changes to Harmony Creek. Officer Ryan Calder was found guilty of assault, willful destruction of property, and multiple civil rights violations in a departmental hearing that was heavily scrutinized by federal observers. He was summarily dismissed from the Harmony Creek Police Department and subsequently faced federal charges, to which he eventually pleaded guilty to avoid a lengthy prison sentence, resulting in probation, a hefty fine, and a permanent ban from working in law enforcement. His reign of casual terror was over. The Harmony Creek Police Department itself was placed under a consent decree, mandating comprehensive reforms supervised by the Department of Justice. This included mandatory de-escalation and implicit bias training for all officers, the implementation of a robust body camera policy, the establishment of an independent civilian review board to handle complaints, and new protocols for investigating use of force incidents. Chief Dale Miller, facing a vote of no confidence from the town council and immense public pressure, opted for an early retirement. His replacement was an outsider, a reform-minded captain from a larger, more diverse city, chosen with input from community leaders, including representatives from Harmony Creek's black churches. The town itself began a slow, often painful process of introspection and healing. The incident had cracked open long-suppressed conversations about race, privilege, and justice.